At my 10-year reunion, a man named Bryce Halloran raised his drink and asked, loud enough for the whole table to hear, "So Marcus, you still playing with batteries in your garage?" And the table laughed. Not cruelly, exactly. Worse than cruelly. They laughed the way you laugh at a child who says he's going to be an astronaut. Kindly. Dismissively. Like my whole life was a cute little hobby they'd already filed away. I said yes. I said I was still building batteries in my garage. And the laughter got a little softer, a little more pitying, and Bryce clapped me on the shoulder and moved on to someone who mattered. What none of them knew, what I barely believed myself yet, was that the thing in my garage was real. And that within a few years, it would be stolen by a billion-dollar company, defended in a courtroom that nearly broke me, and printed in Forbes under 3 words that changed everything. One to watch. Let me tell you where the batteries came from, because it wasn't ambition. It was a night I've never fully gotten over. My name is Marcus Bell. I grew up in a working-class town where the power company was less a utility than a weather system, something that happened to you, that you had no say in and no defense against. Rates went up every year. The grid went down every storm. And you learned, the way poor and ordinary people always learn, that the big systems of the world were not built with you in mind. The night that made me was a winter blackout when I was in my 20s. My father was home by then on an oxygen concentrator, a machine that ran on electricity, the electricity that had just gone out across the whole county for what turned out to be 3 days. I spent that first night driving him to a hospital parking lot 40 minutes away, because the hospital had generators and we didn't, and I sat in that lot holding a flashlight in my father's hand, and I felt something I want you to understand, because it's the engine of this entire story. I felt powerless. Literally and completely powerless, at the mercy of a company that would send us a bill for the outage anyway. And somewhere in that parking lot, a very stubborn idea took root in me. There had to be a better way to store power. A cheaper, safer battery that an ordinary family could actually afford, so that no one else would ever have to drive their father to a parking lot to keep him breathing. I was not a genius. I want to be honest about that, because the myth of the lone genius does a lot of damage. I was a decent engineer with an ordinary degree from an ordinary school and a very extraordinary reason to not give up. I started reading everything about battery chemistry. I filled notebooks. I turned our garage into a lab, first a corner of it, then all of it, until Elena, my wife, was parking on the street and laughing that she'd married a man and gotten a fire hazard. Elena. I have to tell you about Elena, because every story like mine has a person who paid for the dream in a currency the founder never fully sees. She worked double shifts as a dental hygienist for years to keep us afloat while I chased something that, for a very long time, produced nothing but smoke, failure, and credit card debt. We didn't take vacations. We didn't have kids yet because we couldn't afford to. I blew up more prototypes than I can count, once literally, scorching the garage ceiling in a way we never told the landlord about. There were nights I lay awake certain I was a fool, that Bryce and everyone like him were right, that I was a grown man playing with batteries while real adults built real careers. And I want to be honest about the specific shame of that, because I think it's a shame a lot of you know. It's not the failure itself that eats you. It's the look on people's faces at the grocery store when they ask what you're up to these days and you have to say, still working on my project, still in the garage. It's the way your own family lowers their voices about you, kindly, the way you'd talk about someone who's a little unwell. It's overhearing your mother defend you to a relative, saying he's very smart, he just hasn't found his footing yet, and understanding that even the people who love you have quietly moved you into the column marked disappointment. That's the tax you pay for chasing something the world can't see yet. Nobody warns you that the loneliest part of building the future is how much it looks, from the outside, like wasting your life. But then I'd remember the parking lot. I'd remember my father's hand, and the sound of that oxygen machine going quiet when the power died. And I'd go back out to the garage. Because some fires don't go out just because everyone around you can't see them yet. The reunion happened in the middle of all this, at what turned out to be the lowest, most uncertain stretch of the whole journey. I almost didn't go. Elena talked me into it, said I needed to get out of the garage and remember there was a world. I put on the one blazer I owned and we drove to a hotel ballroom full of people I'd spent 10 years not thinking about, and I walked straight into a wall of what I can only call success theater. You know the scene, because you've probably lived a version of it. The reunion is not a reunion. It's a marketplace, and the currency is status, and everyone is quietly, desperately trying to prove that the last 10 years validated them. There were the job titles, dropped like coins on a table. The cars discussed in the parking lot. The carefully casual mentions of houses and bonuses and trips. And presiding over all of it, the way he'd presided over high school, was Bryce Halloran. Bryce had been the golden boy back then and he'd cashed it in exactly as promised. He was now an executive at Nortech Industries, one of the largest energy corporations in the country, and he wore it like a crown. Nortech this, Nortech that, the private flights, the deals. He was the walking advertisement for playing it safe and winning. When the group got around to me, the temperature changed. Not hostile. Just amused. What's Marcus up to? And Elena, God bless her, jumped in before I could deflect, and said with total pride, Marcus is building a new kind of battery. He's going to change how families store energy. And there was a pause. And then Bryce smiled the smile I'll remember on my deathbed, and said, a battery. In your garage. And someone chuckled, and someone else asked if I'd invented the AA yet, and Bryce raised his drink and delivered the line, so Marcus, you still playing with batteries in your garage? And the whole table laughed. I want to describe what that laughter actually does to a person, because I think a lot of you have stood exactly where I stood. It isn't the insult that wounds. It's the certainty behind it. The absolute, comfortable certainty that the world is already sorted, that people like Bryce are the winners and people like me are the amusing background, and that the sorting is permanent. For one hot, humiliating second, standing in that ballroom, I believed them. I felt my whole dream shrink down to what it looked like from the outside. A middle-aged man playing with batteries in a garage while his wife worked doubles. That's the poison in that kind of laughter. It doesn't just mock your present. It tries to foreclose your future. Elena took my hand under the table. We left early. And on the drive home, I was quiet for a long time, and then I said something I'd never said out loud before. I said, I'm going to finish it. Not to show them. To finish it. She squeezed my hand and said, I know. I've always known. What neither of us knew was that the very corporation Bryce had bragged about all night, Nortech, was going to become the villain of the next chapter of my life. The laughter at that table was nothing. The real attack hadn't even started. 18 months after the reunion, in the scorched garage, it finally worked. I need to be careful how I describe this, because the technical details are both the heart of the story and, later, evidence in a courtroom. But in plain terms, I'd found a way to build an energy storage cell using cheaper, safer, more abundant materials than the industry standard, in a design that a modest factory could actually produce at a price a normal family could actually pay. It wasn't magic. It was the 1000th version of an idea I'd been failing at for years, and this one didn't fail. By then I wasn't entirely alone. A man named Ravi Menon had joined me, an actual brilliant engineer I'd met at a supplier who took a massive pay cut to come work in my garage because he believed in the thing. Ravi is important to this story for a reason beyond his brains. He was loyal. In a story that is going to fill up with betrayal, I want you to hold on to Ravi as the counterexample, the proof that the world isn't only Bryces and thieves. We built the first real working unit together at 2 in the morning, and when the numbers came back clean and stable and repeatable, we didn't cheer. We just sat on the garage floor and looked at it, this quiet gray box, and Ravi said, "Marcus, do you understand what this is?" And I did. I understood it was the parking lot, undone. It was every family that would never have to make the drive I made. We named the company Kestrel Energy, after a small, unglamorous, fiercely capable little hawk that hunts by hovering perfectly still. We filed our first provisional patents, scraping together the money for a decent attorney because even then, some instinct told me that the idea was the whole treasure and I had to build a wall around it. I remember Ravi teasing me about how careful I was, how I photographed and dated every notebook page, backed up every file, logged every test. He called me paranoid. I told him I'd spent my whole life being the kind of person nobody believes, and that a man like me couldn't afford to have his truth be a matter of opinion. It had to be a matter of record. That habit, born out of a lifetime of being dismissed, would one day be the only thing standing between me and total ruin. But I didn't know that yet. I just knew I trusted paper more than I trusted people's memory of me. We got a tiny bit of local press. We got our first small pre-orders from neighbors and a couple of small businesses who'd heard what we were doing. For the first time, the thing in the garage was not a hobby. It was a company, with customers, with a product that worked, with a future. And here is where I have to teach you something I learned the hardest possible way, because it's the pivot the whole story turns on. When you are small and you build something valuable, you become visible to two very different kinds of people at exactly the same moment. You become visible to the people who want to help you build it. And you become visible to the people who want to take it. And in those early days, glowing with the pride of finally being taken seriously, I could not yet tell the two apart. I was a man who had spent years being underestimated, suddenly being flattered by sophisticated people in nice suits, and I was starving for exactly the kind of validation that makes a person easy to rob. That's when Vaughn Pierce walked into my life. And Vaughn Pierce was the most charming man I had ever met. Vaughn Pierce found us through the little wave of local press. He called himself a strategic advisor, an angel investor, a connector. He had the resume, or seemed to. He'd been early at companies whose names you'd know. He dressed like money and talked like a mentor, and from the very first meeting he did the thing that, looking back, should have been the warning and instead was the hook. He took me seriously. Completely, flatteringly seriously. He looked at what Ravi and I had built and he said, "Marcus, this isn't a garage project. This is a category. You could be the company that finally breaks the utilities' grip on ordinary people." But you're going to get eaten alive if you don't scale fast, and you don't know how to scale. I do. I want to pause here and speak directly to you, because this is the part of the story where I know some of you are already wincing, already seeing it coming, and I couldn't. That's the thing about this kind of con. It doesn't target the stupid. It targets the earnest. It targets exactly the person who worked alone for years and finally, desperately, wants to believe that someone powerful sees their worth. Vaughn wasn't offering me money first. He was offering me recognition, the very thing Bryce and that whole ballroom had denied me. And a man starving for recognition will hand over almost anything to the first person who offers a full plate. What Vaughn wanted, he explained, was to help us prepare for a serious funding round. To do that, he said, he needed to really understand the technology, the full picture, the chemistry, the manufacturing process, the cost structure, the roadmap. He talked about introductions to real investors, about a board seat, about connections at exactly the scale we needed. And he did the one thing that quieted the small voice in the back of my head. He signed a non-disclosure agreement. A thorough one, drafted by our attorney. He signed it without hesitation, almost with amusement, like a man far too established to ever do anything as grubby as steal. "Marcus," he said, sliding it back across the table, "I've forgotten more NDAs than you'll ever sign. Now show me what you've really got." So I showed him. God help me, I showed him everything. Over several weeks, trusting the signature on that document, I walked Vaughn Pierce through the complete guts of 5 years of my life. The cell chemistry. The manufacturing designs. The cost models that were the real breakthrough, the reason we could hit a price no one else could. Ravi was uneasy, I remember. Ravi asked me once, quietly, do we really need to give him the process details? And I, drunk on being finally believed in, said, he signed the NDA, Ravi. He's on our side. We have to trust someone eventually. I have replayed that sentence 10,000 times. We have to trust someone eventually. It's true. It's also exactly the sentence every con man in history has been counting on. And then, after he had everything, Vaughn Pierce began, very slowly, to disappear. The calls got shorter. The introductions kept almost happening. The funding round was always just around a corner we never turned. And I told myself he was busy, important, that this was how big players operated. I did not yet understand that the transaction was already complete. I had given him the only thing he'd ever wanted. The rest was just him backing out of the room. For months after Vaughn stopped returning my calls, I was standing in a hardware store when I saw it on the little TV above the registers. A glossy corporate announcement. Nortech Industries, unveiling what their CEO called a revolutionary breakthrough in affordable home energy storage. A cheaper, safer battery, built with abundant materials, priced for the ordinary family. They ran an animation of the cell. And I stood in that aisle and felt the floor tilt, because I knew that cell. I had invented that cell. I had bled for that cell in a scorched garage for 5 years. They were describing my technology, in my words, down to the cost story that was supposed to be impossible for anyone but us. I drove home not remembering the drive. I pulled up everything Nortech had published, and the more I read, the colder I got. It wasn't similar. It was mine. And then I found the press release naming their new leadership team for the initiative, and there, smiling out from the screen in a photograph, was Von Pierce. Newly appointed Chief Strategy Officer, Energy Storage Division, Nortec Industries. The man who had signed my NDA, taken 5 years of my life through the door I'd opened for him, and walked it straight into the headquarters of a billion-dollar corporation. And listed just below him, as the executive sponsor of the whole division, was a name I already knew. Bryce Halloran. I have tried many times to describe the specific feeling of that moment, and the closest I can get is this. It was grief. Not anger first, grief. The thing I'd built to undo my own powerlessness had been used to make me more powerless than I'd ever been. The parking lot, weaponized against me. I thought about Elena's doubles. I thought about the years, the debt, my father's hand. And I thought about that reunion table, Bryce's smile, still playing with batteries in your garage, and I understood, with a nausea I can still summon, that the golden boy hadn't just mocked my dream. His company had eaten it. Now, I need to say something to every ordinary person listening, because this is the part that isn't really about me. What Nortec did has a name, several names. Trade secret theft. Breach of contract. Corporate espionage dressed up in a press release. And it is not rare. It is a standard, quiet, devastating play run against small inventors and small founders constantly, precisely because the people who run it are betting on one thing. They're betting that you're too small to fight. They steal from you not in spite of your size but because of it, because they have 100 lawyers and you have a second mortgage, and they know that the courthouse, that great symbol of equal justice, is in practice an arena where the richest gladiator usually wins by simply outlasting the poorer one. They weren't just stealing my battery. They were counting on my smallness to make the theft permanent. That night, Ravi sat in my kitchen, gray-faced, and asked the question that would define the next 2 years of our lives. "Marcus," he said. "What do we do? We can't fight Nortec. Companies like us don't fight companies like them. We'll be bankrupt before we get to a courtroom." And he was right. That was the smart read. That was the sensible thing. And I looked at my friend, and I thought about the parking lot, and I said the reckless thing instead. "They signed a document," I said. Vaughn signed a document. And I kept everything. The first thing Nortec did, once I made noise, was exactly what the corporate playbook says to do. They didn't apologize and they didn't hide. They attacked. Within weeks of my attorney sending the first letter, Nortec's lawyers responded not with a defense but with an offensive. They asserted that they had independently developed the technology. They pointed to a wall of their own patents, freshly filed, that suddenly covered the very ground I'd been standing on for years. And then came the real weapon, the one they use on people like me. They implied, politely, in lawyer language, that if I persisted, they would countersue Kestrel Energy into oblivion, bury us in discovery, and make certain that the process itself, regardless of who was right, would destroy me financially long before any verdict. I want you to sit with the cruelty of that strategy, because it is the actual machinery of how the powerful get away with it. Their bet was never that they'd win on the facts. The facts were against them and they knew it. Their bet was that I could not afford justice. That the sheer cost of pursuing the truth would break an ordinary man before the truth could be heard. This is the dirty secret behind so many David and Goliath stories that never become stories at all, the thousands that end quietly with David signing a settlement and an NDA and disappearing. It's not that Goliath is right. It's that Goliath has figured out how to make being right unaffordable. And it nearly worked on me. I have to be honest about how close it came, because I don't want anyone thinking this was a montage. The legal bills started arriving, and they were numbers that made me physically ill. We took a second mortgage on the house Elena had funded with all those doubles. We burned through what little the company had. Pre-orders stalled because who buys a battery from a company that might not survive its own lawsuit? There were nights Elena and I sat at the same kitchen table where Ravi had asked what we should do, and we ran the math, and the math said stop. The math said take whatever settlement they offer, sign the paper, keep the house, and go get a normal job, and let the parking lot win. I came close. I want the people listening who are in the middle of their own impossible fight to know that I came right up to the edge of quitting, more than once, and that there is no shame in how close I came. The shame belongs to the system that puts ordinary people at that edge for daring to insist on what's theirs. What kept me from stepping off wasn't nobility. It was a folder. Actually, it was several folders, and a hard drive, and a discipline I'd developed almost by accident in all those years of being underestimated. I had kept everything. Every version of every design, time-stamped. Every email with Vaughn. The signed NDA. The dated lab notebooks going back years before Nortech's sudden, independent development. I was a nobody who had been dismissed my whole life, and it turned out that a lifetime of nobodiness had taught me to document my own existence obsessively, because some part of me had always known that one day I'd have to prove I was real. That documentation was about to meet the one person who could turn it into a weapon. Her name was Diane Cho. Diane Cho was an intellectual property attorney who had spent the first half of her career inside a giant corporate firm, on the Goliath side, and had left it, she told me, because she got tired of helping the big fish eat the small ones. When my desperate original lawyer referred the case to her, she agreed to look at my folders as a favor. She called me back the next morning, and her voice had changed. "Mr. Bell," she said, "how organized are the rest of your records? Because if they're all like this, Nortech has made a very expensive mistake." Diane took the case largely on contingency, which means she bet her own time and money on winning, and she did it because, in her words, "I've read 100 of these files and most of them are a mess of he said she said." Yours is a paper trail. You didn't just build a battery, Mr. Bell. You accidentally built a case. And over the following months, together, we assembled it. This is the part the movies skip, the grinding, unglamorous reconstruction of the truth, document by document, timestamp by timestamp. But I want to describe it, because for once in this story the ordinary person's boring diligence becomes the superpower. The heart of it was a timeline, and the timeline was devastating. We could show, with dated and independently verifiable records, the full multi-year evolution of my technology inside that garage, long before Nortech's independent version existed. We could show the exact dates Von Pierce signed the NDA and the exact materials I'd handed him under it. We could show, through Nortech's own public record, that Vaughn had joined them almost immediately after, and that their miraculous breakthrough had materialized in a matter of months, an impossibly short time to develop from scratch something that had taken me half a decade. Diane put it plainly. Real innovation leaves a trail of failures behind it. Yours is all here, years of it. Theirs appears out of nowhere, fully formed, right after their new chief strategy officer had your files in his hands. Juries understand that. You don't build Rome in a quarter. You only move in that fast when you're moving into a house someone else already built. But we needed more than a suspicious timeline. We needed the thing itself. And this is where Nortec's arrogance, the same arrogance that let them mock and steal in the first place, became their undoing. Because during the discovery process, the legal phase where each side must hand over relevant internal documents, Diane went after Nortec's internal communications with a precision they clearly did not expect from a garage startup's legal team. They had assumed, I think, that we'd fold before we ever got here. They had been sloppy in the way powerful people are sloppy, confident that no one would ever get to read their mail. And somewhere in the mountain of documents they were forced to produce, buried and undeleted, was the single thread that would unravel everything. I remember the night Diane called me. It was late. Her voice was very steady, which is how I've learned she sounds when something enormous has happened. "Marcus," she said. "I found the email. Before I tell you what was in the email, I have to tell you what Nortec did the week before we found it, because the timing is the whole lesson." Sensing, maybe, that discovery was getting dangerous, Nortec's lawyers made their move to end it. They offered a settlement. And it was engineered not as justice but as humiliation. They offered a sum that sounded like a lot to a man drowning in legal debt, just enough to cover my bills and let me limp away, in exchange for two things. I would sign away all claims to my own technology forever. And I would sign a permanent NDA, a gag order, promising never to speak of what they'd done. Take the money, surrender the invention, and disappear in silence. That was the deal. That's almost always the deal. It's how these stories are meant to end, in a quiet room, with the small person signing away both their creation and their voice. Elena and I talked about it until 3 in the morning. Because I want to be truthful with you, the money would have saved the house. It would have ended the fear. And Diane, being an honest lawyer, laid out plainly that going forward was still a gamble, that even with a strong case, a corporation with infinite resources could appeal and delay for years. Taking the deal was the safe, sane, defensible choice. And sitting at that table, exhausted and afraid, I understood for the first time in my life exactly how the powerful win so often. Not by being right. By making the safe choice and the just choice two different things, and then waiting for tired, frightened people to choose safety. I don't blame anyone who signs that paper. I almost did. What tipped me, in the end, wasn't courage. It was the gag order. I could almost stomach the idea of them keeping the money and the market. What I could not stomach was the clause that would force me to pretend it never happened, to carry the truth silently for the rest of my life while Vaughn and Bryce told the world a lie. Elena saw it on my face before I said it. She put her hand flat on the table and said, "They can try to take the battery. I'll be damned if they're going to buy your silence too." And that was the moment the decision stopped being about money. Because a settlement with a gag order isn't the end of a theft. It's the last stage of it. It's them stealing the story after they've stolen the thing, so that no one who comes after you is ever warned. I decided I would rather lose the house telling the truth than keep it living inside their lie. I want to talk to you directly right now, because if you've come this far in my story, I think it's because something in it belongs to you too. Maybe you're in your own fight against something far bigger than you. Maybe you've been mocked, or robbed, or told to take the safe deal and stay quiet. Maybe you're tired in the specific way that only an unfair fight makes you tired. If you've made it this far with me, I want to invite you to subscribe to our channel and join us every day. Because this channel exists for exactly one reason: to remind ordinary, overlooked, underestimated people that the story is not over just because the powerful have declared it over. Your voice is the one thing they always try to buy last and cheapest, and it is the one thing you should never sell. I told Nortec no. I told them no with the house on the line and my hands shaking. And 3 days later, in that mountain of documents their arrogance had forced them to surrender, Diane found the email. And when she read it to me over the phone that night, I had to sit down on the garage floor, in the same spot where Ravi and I had first seen the battery work, because I finally understood that the crime they'd been so sure was perfect had never been perfect at all. They just never expected the nobody to still be standing when the truth came out. The email was from Vaughn Pierce to a senior Nortec executive, and it was sent 9 days after Vaughn had signed my NDA. Attached to it were my files, my chemistry, my manufacturing process, my cost models. And the body of the email, in Vaughn's own confident words, said, in essence, that he had secured the complete technical package from the Bell Garage operation, that the founder was an unsophisticated engineer with no real backing, and that Nortec could bring this to market as our own well before he has the resources to do anything about it. He had put it in writing. The contempt, the theft, and the strategy, all of it, in a single email he was certain no one would ever read. The same contempt Bryce had aimed at me across a reunion table, now typed into a corporate server as a business plan. I'm going to be honest about the courtroom, because people imagine a single dramatic moment and it wasn't that. It was Diane, calm and merciless, walking a jury through the timeline we'd built, and then placing that email at the center of it like a key in a lock. She showed them the years of my documented work. She showed them the NDA with Vaughn's signature. She showed them the email, 9 days later, with my files attached and my life described as a thing to be taken. And she showed them Nortec's miraculous, independent breakthrough appearing months afterward. She didn't have to raise her voice. She just laid the pieces on the table in order, the way I'd laid out batteries for years, and let 12 ordinary people see the shape of what had been done. Ordinary people, it turns out, understand theft. They understand it in their bones. They've all had something taken by someone bigger who was sure they'd never fight back. Nortec's defense collapsed under the weight of their own words. You cannot argue independent development when your chief strategy officer emailed the stolen files to your executives before the development began. Faced with that email in open court, their story disintegrated, and their strategy shifted in real time from winning to survival. The case that they had been so certain would bankrupt and silence me became, instead, the thing that exposed them. The jury found for Kestrel Energy. The damages were enormous, large enough to make the theft the most expensive mistake in that division's history. But the number was never the real verdict. The real verdict was that it was now a matter of public record, established in a court of law, that Nortec Industries had stolen the work of a man they'd been too arrogant to fear. And here is the reckoning, the part where the inversion completes itself. Vaughn Pierce, whose written words had sunk the whole ship, became radioactive, the kind of liability no one in the industry would touch, his career as a charming advisor over the moment the email became public. The theft triggered exactly the kind of regulatory and legal scrutiny that follows a corporation caught red-handed. And Bryce Halloran, the golden boy, the executive sponsor who had put his name on the division and his laughter on my dream, found himself attached, permanently and publicly, to a landmark corporate theft case. The man who mocked me for playing with batteries in my garage was now a footnote in the legal record of why you don't steal them. He'd spent his whole life betting that the sorting was permanent, that winners stayed winners. He'd bet his name on it. And he'd bet it, of all the people in the world, against me. Winning the case did something I hadn't expected. It didn't just save Kestrel Energy. It made us. The same story that had nearly destroyed us, the small garage inventor who stood up to a corporate giant and won, turned out to be the exact story the world had been hungry for. The press that had once given us a 2-inch local column now wanted the whole saga. Investors who wouldn't have returned my calls a year earlier were suddenly, urgently interested, and this time I had Diane and hard-won wisdom between me and every charming handshake. The damages from the verdict, combined with real funding from people who'd finally seen what we were, gave us something we'd never had. The resources to actually build the thing at scale. And so the battery that was born in a blackout finally started reaching the families it was born for. That's the part one need you to understand, because it's the part that has nothing to do with revenge. We started getting letters. A woman whose son was on a ventilator, who could finally sleep through a storm. A retired couple on a fixed income who watched their utility bill fall by half. An entire rural community that pooled our units so their clinic would never go dark again. Every one of those letters was a parking lot that never had to happen. Every one was the original promise, kept. I had set out, in my grief and stubbornness, to make sure no one else would ever have to drive their father to a parking lot to keep him breathing. And now, because of a battery some people had laughed at, fewer of them would. Then, this year, the call came that gives this story its title. A reporter from Forbes, working on a feature about the companies quietly reshaping how ordinary people access power. She'd followed the whole arc, the garage, the theft, the trial. And when the piece ran, Kestrel Energy was named one of the companies to watch, 3 words printed in the one magazine that the Bryce Hallorans of the world treat as scripture. I did not frame it to spite anyone. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't think, when I saw it, about a ballroom, and a raised drink, and a table full of people laughing at a man who was still playing with batteries in his garage. There was a second reunion, eventually. It was smaller and quieter, and Bryce did not attend. Nobody asked me if I was still playing with batteries in my garage. A few people who had laughed the loudest 10 years earlier now approached carefully, the way you approach someone you've misjudged, and told me they'd always known I'd make it. I let them say it. There was no point in correcting the memory. People rewrite their own laughter constantly, it's how they live with themselves. I just shook their hands and thought about how strange it is that the same room can deliver a verdict on your life and then quietly reverse it, and how little either verdict actually had to do with me. I want to be careful here, at the moment of vindication, because vindication is where a lot of people lose themselves. I did not become obsessed with rubbing Bryce's face in it. I didn't have to, and that's the quiet truth about this kind of justice. The world had already resorted itself, not because I forced it but because reality finally asserted what had always been true. The reunion that had felt like a verdict on my life turned out to be nothing of the kind. It was just a room full of frightened people performing certainty, and the most certain man in it had built his whole identity on a corporation that got caught stealing from the guy he mocked. I didn't need to say a word. The record said it for me, the same way my folders had. I'd learned by then that the most complete revenge and the most complete peace often look identical from the outside. They both look like a person who simply went back to work. My father lived to see the verdict. He didn't live to see the Forbes piece, and I'd be lying if I said that doesn't sit in my chest most days. But near the end, off the oxygen machine that had started all of it and onto a better one now powered, when the grid failed, by a gray box I'd built, he said something I'll keep for the rest of my life. He said, "You know, Marcus, I always felt guilty. That night in the parking lot. Like I'd failed you, needing all that just to breathe." And I told him the truth. I told him that night in the parking lot wasn't the night he failed me. It was the night he gave me the only thing that ever mattered. A reason that was bigger than their laughter. People ask me now if I'm glad it happened the way it did. The theft, the trial, the years of fear. And the honest answer is complicated. I would never wish that fight on anyone, and I carry things from it that don't fully heal, the nights Elena cried, the debt, the friends who vanished when we looked like losers. But I've come to believe that the mockery and the theft, as much as they nearly destroyed me, also clarified me. They burned away every reason I'd ever had for building the thing except the real one. By the end, I wasn't building it to prove Bryce wrong or to get rich or to be in a magazine. I was building it for the woman with the son on the ventilator. Their contempt, in the end, gave me something pure. So let me leave you with the thing I most want you to take from all of this, whoever you are, wherever you're standing in your own version of this story. The people who laugh at you are not oracles. They are just frightened people betting that the world is already finished being written, because a finished world is one where they get to stay comfortable. Your garage, your notebook, your quiet, stubborn, impossible thing, is not evidence of your foolishness. It might be the truest thing about you. Keep your records. Keep your receipts. Keep your reason close, closer than your ambition. And when the powerful bet that you're too small to matter, remember that they are only ever betting. They don't actually know. I was a man playing with batteries in a garage, and they were all so sure. If this story meant something to you, follow the channel and share it with 5 people who need to hear it tonight, especially the ones with a quiet, impossible thing of their own. Leave a comment about the moment someone laughed at your dream, and what you did next. And if there's a story you want to see told here, put it below. I read every one. Somewhere out there, right now, someone is being laughed at for something that's going to change the world.